Man, it would not be a Holy Panda Switch release if there wasn't some sort of drama surrounding them. We'll get into the drama part a little bit later because I know everyone is dying to hear the sound differences between the first run of Holy Pandas and these new ones, so it only makes sense for us to start with the sound test. Now, if you've never heard or experienced what the V1 switches are like, go and check out my review on those switches to get a baseline feel for them. I'm gonna play a few clips back to back labeled as A or B, and as you hear them, drop your guesses below in the comment section whether the V1 switches or the V2s. Both sets are tested straight out of the box with no mods. Alright, could you guys tell the difference? If you picked A as the Holy Panda V1s, you were wrong. That was actually the V2s. After testing these side by side, the first thing I noticed when typing on the V2s is that there's a very audible ping. Here, take another listen. It seems to be coming from the spacebar, but it happens on the larger mods as well, such as the shift key. The V2s have a slightly lower pitch due to the new housing, and the typing experience is ever so slightly different. I wouldn't go as far as saying they're heavier, but I do feel like they're more resistant compared to the V1s. Now that we got that first sound test and some of my initial thoughts out of the way, let's talk about what makes these V2s different and address some of the concerns people are having. First off, the package of these Holy Pandas were horrible compared to the first run. It's now this generic cardboard box, which is whatever, but more importantly, this is how the contents of the box looked right after opening them. The switches are completely loose in the box with none of them secured to the black trays. The older style packaging not only had grooves in the cardboard to hold down the keys, but it also had a thin stock paper folded into a fan shape to hold everything down during shipment. I also noticed that some of the switches have this black flake around and some even inside the housing, and more than a few were contaminated with streaks of black grease. So far, not very happy with the packaging or the QA. Now, Drop claims that these switches come unlubed from the factory, and a lot of people bought in because of this, but after taking a bunch of switches apart, I found that this is not true. There's still lube and it's still very inconsistent. Some had thin layers applied while others were just as messy as the V1s. Drop is getting a lot of shit for this, and I think it's warranted. The phrase unlubed from the factory is pretty clear cut, and if you market this as a selling point, it better be accurate. Saying it's unlubed, then mentioning later in a buried comment that the stems are actually lubed during the manufacturing process, and unlubed actually means foregoing additional lube on top during assembly, it's just gonna rub people the wrong way. Okay, with that out of the way, by reducing the lube, there are a couple side effects. First, the switch does feel a bit scratchier, especially in the travel after the bump, but to me this is fine, preferred even because now I can go in with my own lube of choice, in this case a 3203, and apply as little or as much as I want, which is really nice. Another side effect I noticed is that out of the box, it feels like the switches needed a bit more force to actuate. Initially, I thought that might be because the springs have changed, but I'm pretty certain they're the same. So I suspect that the added friction is what's causing the resistance during the key presses and why they felt a bit heavier during my side-by-side typing test. During the test, I also noticed that the pitch of the switches were slightly lower, and this is probably due to the retooled palm housing. The retool changes can easily be spotted if you have V1 and V2 switches side by side. For example, the two dots here at the top are gone, the openings here have different sizes, and even the plate mount tabs here have a slightly different shape. The last pain point is with how Drop has been managing their shipments. Drop operates on a concept called first in, first out, where if you were the first to purchase, you'd be the first to receive the product. In the case of these Holy Pandas, the switches were shipped out of orders, so a lot of people that bought in early were in the situation where they were watching other people who have placed their orders well after them receive their switches first. To address this, Drop issued a $10 credit to affected run IDs, but this is where things go a bit wrong. The credit wasn't issued to the invoice of the switch, so if you paid $70 or whatever dollars, you didn't get a discount off of that. The credit would only be applied for future purchases. And this is kind of weird to me because if you have a subset of customers that are unhappy with your service, why would they want to spend more money with you to use this credit? I've had shipping problems with Drop in the past, and in that situation, they issued me credit back on the transaction. So what they're doing here feels kind of like an empty gesture. Sure, you get $10, but Drop also gets more sales. So for me personally, I ordered my switches on February 7th and was affected by the shipping delays and ended up receiving these last week, with many people receiving their switches well before that. So how do I feel about this? For me personally, I don't really care. When I join a group buy and it says it's gonna ship by a certain date, I generally add 3 or so months on top of that just to manage my own expectation, since delays like these are extremely common during group buys, especially ones of this scale. However, for others, especially if this is their first experience buying an expensive custom switch, I completely understand their frustrations, and I definitely wish Drop had handled this issue a bit better. On the other hand, I do see the hard situation that Drop is in as well. They have an extremely hyped up switch that everyone wants to get their hands on, which would already be a difficult challenge to distribute with a supply chain that isn't screwed up. But hey, dealing with these kind of problems and unhappy customers is part of doing business. So take care of your customers and they'll return the favor many times over. Well, that's it for today. Aside from your guesses, comment below and let me know how your Holy Panda experience has been with this most recent drop. I'm really curious if I'm the outlier or if this is a common theme. Like, subscribe, it really helps me out, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.